Masechet Yevamot Daf Kof Tet Zayin. We saw yesterday a machloket between Abaye and Rava, that when you see a get or a document that has people's names in it, and do you worry that there may be other people with the same name? Do we have to go and check the whole city or the whole world to see if there's someone else with that name, or do we assume that these are the very same people? Abaye said, Chayshinan, yes, we have to worry that maybe there's someone else with the same exact husband and wife's name, and therefore maybe this get was written for someone else. We cannot believe it. We have to check. And Rava said, no, we don't have to worry about it. Okay, that was the machloket. And we saw Abaye brought a source from the story that we ended with, and Rava countered it. And so now we're going to ask Rava. Amar Rava mina amina la. What's my reasoning? How come Rava doesn't worry about someone else with the same name? Well, he also has his own precedent. One time in the city of Mechoza, there were a couple of promissory notes. And it said that these following people owe money to, let's say, Reuven, right? Chavai bar Nanai owes him $100, and Nanai bar Chavai also owes him $100. And these promissory notes were brought by Reuven to Rava and says, I want to collect the money. And Rava authorized them and says, yes, you can collect. And he collected some zuzim, some dinarim with these very promissory notes. Now, even though this is a very common name, lots of people named with the same name. So really, Chavai bar Nanai could have claimed, wait a second, it's not me he has collecting from, there's another guy with the same name. But you see that such a claim was not accepted, and they were able to collect it. So here is a proof, a precedent that in fact one does not have to worry about other people with the same name. Good. Ilin fila mizhar zahir be ilipikadon kevan dishme kishme la makpid gabe. Now, how about Abaye? Abaye said that we do have to worry. So how come in that case the rabbi permitted him to collect, right? Abba bar Abu permitted him to collect. How would Abaye explain his decision? Oh, he will say a promissory note is different. What are you worrying about? That maybe he dropped it? No, people are careful about their promissory notes. It's like walking around with cash or a check. And so the person, Reuven, who's carrying it around because people owe him money, he's going to be careful to take care of it. Ilipikadon, maybe he gave it to someone else with the same name, right? It has to say this Chanai bar Bavai, Chavai bar Nanai owes Reuven 100 zuz. So if he gave it to someone, can you hold this for me? Kevan dishme kishme la makpid gabe. Since they have the same name, he's not going to give it to another person named Reuven, because then the person who is watching the document for him can then easily go and take it, right? If you had a check written out to you, you wouldn't tell someone with your same name to go and, hey, can you hold this check for me? Because that wouldn't make sense. Then the person could go and cash it. So, first, surely he didn't lose it because people are careful with it like cash. And second, he didn't give it to anyone. Mai amart. And maybe you'll say, Dilma masar aleh. Maybe he actually did want to give it to someone else with the same name. Kind of like the way we used to endorse a check over to someone so that they could go and cash it, collect it. Maybe he actually happened to owe another Reuven a certain amount of money. So you see here, take this promissory note instead. So that's fine. Otiyot niknot bimsira. After all, letters, meaning a document, can be acquired simply through passing. Different items have different ways of acquiring them. Land has to be acquired one way, movable objects, animals, and if you want to acquire a document, all you have to do is pass it to the person, and so then it would be fine if that person took it. Even if he wasn't the original Reuven, it's still okay, he can still use it, and it is acquired. So therefore, that's why Abaye says in this case, I'm not worried that there's two different people with the same name. It's not the same as a get, where it could be lost and or it could get into someone else's hands, and maybe it's not the same people with the same names. Maybe it's not the same people, but they have the same names, and so that's why Abaye disagrees with Rava. Okay, now we're going to see an interesting case where Abaye and Rava say the reverse of what they said above, because of their understanding of this case. Hahu gita de ishtakach besura uchtiv behachi besura mata ana anan bar chiya nehardea petarit utrachit pelonit intiti. There was a certain get that was found in the city of Sura, and in it was written that here in Sura, I, Anan Barchia, that's his name, who is from Nehardea. So even though he's from Nehardea, this transaction, this get is being given in Sura. I am sending away and divorcing my wife, and it says her name on it. Good. So it has his name, it has her name, it has a place name. So now ubedakura banan misura avad nehardea velahava anan barchia acharina lebar me'anan barchia mechagra dava benehardea. And so now the rabbis wanted to check, is there anybody else with the same name, that the man's name is Anan Barchia and the woman's name is also the same, and may have been in the same city? And so they checked all the way from Surah to Nehardea, in other words, the conceivable place where such a person could be, and they found there was in fact another person named Anan Barchia, who was from Chagra, that city, but he happened to be in Nehardea, and this get was given in Surah. So they further investigated. Ki ikatab da hahugita anan barchia mechagra gaban hava. Two witnesses came and said on that day that it says in the get that it was written, Anan Barchia was with us in Nehardea and not in Surah. So therefore, it can't be him. To summarize, there are two people named Anan Barchia. One is lives in Nehardea. One once came from Chagra, but then he was in Nehardea. So the description fits both of them. So there's a problem. There's two people with the same name. We don't know which one of these gave the get. So we investigated. We found that this other one, the one who was originally from Chagra, was not in Surah on the day of giving the get. And it says that this get was written in Surah. And he was not in Surah. He was in Nehardea on the day the get was written. Therefore, it can't be him, can't be the other guy. So we cross him off the list, and therefore it is the other guy, the one that we thought it was originally, the one who's coming to claim, and she's bringing and says, yeah, this is my husband, and he gave me a get. So therefore, they were able to authorize the get because the witnesses helped them cross out the other guy from the list. That's the case. Now, Amar Abaye, Afledidi damina chayshinan. Abaye said, usually I'm worried about maybe there's a different person with the same name. But here, hacha lo chayshinan. In this case, I don't worry. I would authorize that get. After all, witnesses came and said he was in Nehardea, and this get was written in Surah. So he could not have been in Surah. Therefore, I know that the one that was in fact in Surah, the other guy, the guy we thought that she claimed it is in fact the person. I don't worry about the other guy who was in the wrong city. Good. Amar Rava, and Rava says, I think the opposite. Usually, I don't think you have to go and check to see if there's anyone else with the same name. But in this case, I would worry. Dilma begamla parcha azal. Iname beqfisa, iname mile masar. Because here, maybe somehow this guy was in Nehardea and in Surah on the same day. How could he be in both? Well, maybe he went on a flying camel. Not literally a flying camel. This means an express camel. There, in fact, are different species of camels, and some can gallop quite quickly. And so maybe he went on a really fast camel, and he was able to get there. Or maybe he jumped some kind of teleportation. Rashi says, he said by divine name, he was able to get there. Maybe he took the HOV lane, whatever. It's possible that he got there quickly. Or yet another possibility, maybe in fact he was in the Hadadah the whole time, and he didn't go on any express lane. But he gave verbal instructions from the Hadadah, and he sent a message to the scribe in Surah saying, I authorize you to write a get. Which you can do. You can send a messenger to write a get and to give a get. Kedamalhu Rav le-safre. Rav in fact instructed the scribes. V'chenamalhu Rav Huna le-safre. And Rav Huna also instructed the scribes and told them, Ki itnechu beshili ketuvu beshili. Afagav demim sedan mile bihini. Listen, scribe, if you are in the city called Shili, you should write in the get, this get is being written and given in Shili. Even though the instructions from the man, from the husband, were sent to you from Hini, another nearby city. So don't write the place where the husband is, write the name of the place where you are. And v'chitnu behini, and the other way around, if you, the scribe, are in Hini, ketuvu behini, write, this get is being written in Hini. Afagav demim sadan mili b'shile, even though the husband sent instructions from Shili. And therefore, it could very well be that this, we don't know which guy it is, because the one that is, there could be the one that was in Surah that day, or it could be that it was the one that was in the Hadadah that day, and he simply sent a message, and that's why the scribes wrote in Surah, which is the appropriate thing, even though the husband was, two witnesses came and testified that the husband was in Nehar De'ah, all that is fine. Okay, so that's why Rava said, I don't trust it. It could be either way. You need to investigate more to see which man in fact was. Okay, now we're getting back to the sesame seeds. We kind of left that hanging this whole time. Right? Remember the case where one man gave a shomer, hey, can you watch this barrel of sesame seeds for me? And then he came back to get them, and the watchman said, oh, you already took them, and these are different seeds. We emptied it out, and I put new sesame seeds in it. So you assume that these are the same, or that they were emptied out. We saw machloket about that, so here's an answer. Rav Yemar Amar la Chayshinan. Ravina Amar Chayshinan. Rav Yemar said, we don't have to worry that they changed them out. Ravina says, no, we do have to worry that they are different ones. V'hilchata Chayshinan. And the bottom line is, we do have to be concerned that the watchman already gave back the original sesames and happened to fill up the barrel with the same exact amount. And therefore, the watchman does not have to pay, and the claimant does not loses the case and cannot collect more. All right, now the Mishnah, all that was going back to the Mishnah that said that if a woman says, a wife says, my husband is dead, we believe her at peacetime, and if there's shalom bayit. But if it's not peacetime, and now we're going to talk about if there's a fight between them, right? If they were fighting before they left on this trip, and then she comes back and said, oh, my husband died, we don't believe her because, well, let's see. So first of all, what does a fight mean? What's the definition of a fight? Ketata beno lebena. Hechidami ketata beno lebena. What's an example where there's a quarrel? Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shemuel be'omeret le'ba'ala garsheni, where the wife told her husband, I want a divorce. I want out of here. If she says that, that means they're not getting along so well. If they go on a trip and she comes back and says, my husband is dead, we don't believe her because maybe she's making it up, as we'll see. Now we reject that. We say, every wife says that. At some point or another, people get upset, they get angry, they lose their temper, and they say, give me a divorce, right? Look at every episode where Ralph Cramden says, one of these days, Alice, right? So every episode, he wants to divorce her, but he doesn't really want to. He changes his mind immediately. Okay, so therefore, it can't be that this is too low of a bar, just because a wife says, I want a divorce, not sufficient to call that a quarrel. Rather, when she tells her husband, you already divorced me. She claims that they're already divorced. Now she's like already acting as if she's divorced. So that's That's a step higher than just asking for a divorce. Okay, ולהמנה מדרב חמנונה, דאמר רב חמנונה, אישה שאמרה לבעלה גרשתני, נאמנת, חזקה אין אישה מעיזה פניה בפני בעלה. Well, in that case, if she says to her husband, you already divorced me, well, then we should actually believe her. We should for sure believe her to say that she is divorced, right? Because we already said this whole halakha is that if she comes back and says, my husband died, we don't believe her. Wait a second, we can believe her because Rav Amnah gave a halakha that said, if a woman says in front of her husband, you have already divorced me, we believe her, even if she doesn't produce a get, because we have a chazakah. A woman is not so brazen to dare to say in front of her husband to make up a lie and say you divorced me. She wouldn't do that, even if they're not getting along. So if she says that, we believe her. So in this case, we would believe her. So that can't be that. Rather, be'omeret gerashtani bifnei peloni ufloni v'sha'ilna ve'amru lo hayu devarim me'olam. Rather, she tells her husband, you divorced me in front of so and so. And this other guy, there's two witnesses. And then we go and ask those two witnesses that she named, and they said, no, that we never saw such a thing. So here, where on the one hand, it makes sense that we should believe her because usually people are not so brazen to lie, but now we have something that detracts from her veracity, which is that the witnesses that she claimed were there say that never happened. And so in this case, we do not believe her, right, that she was divorced, because the witnesses say it didn't happen. But this is a very high level of quarrel that she would say in front of him, you already divorced me. So that's what's called a quarrel, and therefore, if she goes away, if that kind of couple goes away, and she says, my husband is dead, we do not believe her. Now, my tamaya diktata, how come we don't believe her to say my husband is dead? What are we worried about? Rav Chanina says she may be just lying, right? He's actually totally fine. And she comes and says, my husband is dead, so that she can get remarried. She wants out of the marriage. Okay, it's fine that she wants out of the marriage, but she does have to wait to actually get a get. So we do not believe her because she has ulterior motive here. Rav Shimi bar Ashe amar mishum damra bid-dameh. Rav Shimi says, no, she's not going to make up a total lie and say my husband is dead when he's totally alive and sitting by the beach in some other place, but rather she will make a presumption. If in fact the husband was in some dangerous situation or was very sick, then her confirmation, because she had a big fight, she will have a confirmation bias, and she will assume, he was so sick or he was captured, he's probably dead. And because they have a big fight and she hates him, so that she will convince herself that yes, he's definitely dead. That's why we don't trust her judgment to say that he's dead if they had a fight. If they have a peacetime, then she is interested in believing that he's living, even if he's in some kind of dangerous situation. So if it's a peaceful relationship, then we would believe her. So that's the reason. What would be a practical difference between these two reasons? A difference would be where the man is the one that initiated the quarrel. He's the one that got angry at her in the first place. In that case, he's really upset, but she still is in love with him. And so in that case, because she is still in love with him, she wouldn't make up a total lie just so she could be with someone else. But she may be still resentful, upset enough that she may make a mistake. That would be an example of the difference between the two cases. Next, we have a question regarding also a situation where the husband and wife are fighting. But now it's not the wife that comes back and says the husband is dead, but rather one witness, which generally we do believe. When one witness comes and says a man died, we believe one witness so that she can remarry. But what if we know they were fighting? Does that make a difference? On the one hand, we could say, what is the reason why we do believe one witness? Well, because it's something that the truth will be revealed. Because if he is alive, and eventually, he'll either come back or someone will say, hold on, I saw him. And so one witness, nobody is going to lie about something that will be revealed and show that he's a liar. And so here also, hachaname lo mishaker, just because the husband and wife are fighting makes no impact on the one witness. He still would not lie. So therefore, yes, we can trust him. Or the other side of the equation is ta'ama de'ay de'had mehem an mishum dehi daika o min nasba ve'acha kevan de'itlo ketata lo daika o min nasba teku. Or on the other hand, maybe the reason that we believe one witness to say the husband is dead is not because we're fully believing that one witness, but rather because based on that one witness testimony, we say, hey, listen, you can go and do your own investigation. And the wife will then, before she remarries, because she has to take upon herself that responsibility and the consequences if the husband is alive. So because she is doing her own investigation, therefore here, because they're having a fight, maybe she won't do such a thorough investigation because she's kind of happy to hear that this testimony, even from one witness, that the husband is dead. And she's like, yeah, must be right, because she wants to get remarried, so she's not going to check. And therefore, we cannot trust one witness when they are fighting, and so we leave that question unanswered. The last part of the Mishnah was the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Omer le'olam ena. He says that one witness, a wife, if she says, my husband is dead, we do not believe her unless she comes with her crying, with her clothes torn, and we can see, this is obviously someone who's very, very distraught. Because she learned that her husband is dead. Then we believe her. But if she's all composed and is, just says it matter-of-factly, then we don't believe her. So, whereas Tanakama says, no matter what, it doesn't matter how she's acting. So here's a braita. Tanya, Amru lo l'Rabbi Yehuda, lidbarecha pikacha tinaseh, shota lo tinaseh. The braita explicates the conversation between Tanakama and Rabbi Yehuda. And so the Rabbanan said to Rabbi Yehuda, according to you, if a woman is wise and she knows, the court will only believe me and allow me to remarry if I act. So, since she knows that if she's wise, she will put on a whole act and tear her clothes, and then, she'll convince them. But if she doesn't know that, if she's foolish, and she just and doesn't act the part, then she can't get married. In other words, it shouldn't depend on whether the woman knows that she has to act disheveled or not. Ela hadzo ve'hadzo tinaseh. Therefore, the rabbis say, we're not going to make a difference between one person and another. Everybody reacts differently, even if is in fact true that she saw her husband dead, and therefore, as long as she says it, we do believe her. As long as it's not a time of war and they're not fighting, good. Now we have a great story. One time, a woman came to the Bet Din of Rabbi Yehuda. He's the one that said that we're only going to believe her if she acts the part. Amri la safti ba'alech kiri manech sitri mazyech. So they told her, there were other people around, and they said that I guess maybe we're in the waiting room waiting to come to the court. And the people there said, listen, you better lament your husband, tear your clothing, unbind your hair, and look all disheveled. Sitri mazyech. Now, because Rabbi Yehuda is only going to believe you if you act the part. So now the Gemara asks, that's the story. Alefuha shikra. Wait, they told her to lie? Is that right? Should you tell someone to lie? No. So the answer is inhu kirabanan svira lehu amri ta'abed achi ki hechi delish riya. Rather, the people that were around, they were other sages or students, and they really felt they agreed with Rabbanan, that we believe a wife to say my husband died, no matter how she's acting, doesn't matter. So therefore, they didn't think that there was anything wrong, even if she would just go directly in, that they said, she should be believed. But they said, listen, you better, since Rabbi Yehuda happens to be the one that's in charge of this court, you better look the part so that he will permit you to marry, otherwise not. So the idea here is that if something is actually true, because she should be believed because we're following Rabbanan, but just because of the circumstances, in order to get through, you need to kind of get a loophole in order to pass through this particular sage's opinion. So it's permitted to fulfill his requirements, even though it's kind of putting on a show. I think what the story here is showing is the contents of the dialogue right before, where the rabbis say, it doesn't make sense. A wise woman will just act. And here you go. Someone is just acting. So that's why that this story kind of proves why the Yehuda's criteria is really not something very practical. You're kind of encouraging people to act and not be sincere. All right, next Mishnah, also about a woman being believed. In what circumstances do we believe her? Bet Hillel omrim lo shamanu ela beba'am min hakasir u'b'ota medina uchmaseh shehaya. Bet Hillel in this case is actually more stringent, and he says we only believe a wife to come and say, my husband died, if she's coming from the grain harvest, and it's in the grain harvest was within the same country, like the story that happened. We're going to see in a couple of minutes the full story. In that story, there was a woman who was with her husband and happened to be in the grain farm during the grain season in that country, and her husband was bitten by a snake while out there, and so then she came back and said, my husband died. Bet Hillel says, and then the rabbis checked it out, and they saw that she was correct, and they said, you know what? We should believe a woman's testimony, because look, here she was there and she knew. Bet Hillel says, yeah, that precedent only works for another circumstance that's precisely like that precedent. We only believe a woman if the circumstances in which we believed her before in that story are the same. So it's very limited in our leniency of believing one witness, the wife of the husband. Amru lahem bet Shammai, achata ba min hakasir, v'achata ba min hazetim, v'achata ba min habasir. Bet Shammai says, doesn't matter where they're coming from, if it's the grain harvest or the olive harvest or the grape harvest. Doesn't matter what the person was doing. It doesn't matter what country, even if it happened in a different country and the wife says, we were away in another country and my husband died there, we believe her. So when the rabbi said during the harvest season, they were just saying that happened to be when that specific story happened. It's actually maybe more likely that someone will die during the grain season, which is when the days are very long and hot, and so there's more likelihood that a person will maybe get sunstroke, or because they're out there for so long, the snakes are out and be bitten by a snake. So it just happens to be that case, but there's no reason to make any distinction. If the wife is believed in that case, she should be believed in any case. Chazru Bet Hillel, Bet Hillel says, okay, good point. And so Bet Hillel changed their mind, and were lenient like Bet Shammai. Good. Tanya, Amru lahem Bet Shammai le Bet Hillel, lidibrechem, en li ela kesir chitim, kesir seorin minayin. That is going to fill in more of the dialogue between them of the Mishnah. So Bet Shammai says to Bet Hillel, according to you, you're only going to believe them during the wheat harvest and not during the barley harvest, because in that story happened to be the wheat harvest. In other words, even grain, you're going to have to, how finely exact does the story have to be to the original case in order for you to apply it? I mean, this is absurd. And it is only if he's actually harvesting, the reaping the grain, only then. What if he's harvesting grapes or olives or dates or figs? We have we say the word harvest for everything, but just like Eskimos have 30 words for snow, so too farmers have different words for harvesting every different kind of crop, and that's what you have in Hebrew. Where they used to be farmers, so they have all these different words depending on what they're doing. But the point is, what's the difference? What they are harvesting, the law should be the same. So, rather, Bet Shammai says, happened to be that story, when the rabbis decided we should believe a one woman, was during the grain harvest, but the same is true for everything. And the same is true regarding a country. In that case, happened to be, it was within the same country. But if it was from one country to another, what's the difference? We still believe her. Bet באותה מדינה שכי ינשה מרתת, במדינה אחרת לא שכי ינשה לא מרתת. Bet Hillel says, hold on, it makes a big difference. If it's in one country where there are lots of people that are going back and forth and traveling within the country, so then a woman will be afraid to lie. She's not going to lie, because if she says, my husband died, even though he's alive, there'll be someone that will come from a nearby city within the same country and say, oh, I saw your husband alive, and her lie will be revealed. She's not going to lie. But if it comes from one country to another, there are not many people who travel from one country to another. So she could leave her husband behind in some other country, alive, and come to another country and say, my husband died there. And what's the chances that someone's going to see her and travel and come? Very little, so she would not be afraid. That's why Bet Hillel says, I will only trust the testimony of a wife in the same country, but in a different one. Bet Shammai says, no, I can believe her because there are caravans. There's always people traveling from one country to another, right? There's the spice route, the silk route, and so mail coming. So therefore, the wife will be afraid to lie, even if it's from one country to another. All right, we've been assuming this story. What is the actual incident that occurred? One time it was the end of the wheat harvest. You see, it was in fact the wheat harvest in that case. 10 people went out to go and harvest some wheat. A snake came, bit one of the men, and he died. So the woman, his wife, came and told the Bet Din, I was out there, I saw my husband die. The Bet Din did not believe her, because this was before the law was in place. So they sent an investigatory party, and they said, oh yes, in fact, she was telling the truth. And so the rabbis discussed this further and says, you know what? See, this is true in this case, so we should make an enactment that we should allow a wife to be believed if she says my husband died, in other cases as well. And so when they said that, the question is, Bet Hillel says, fine, we'll let her in other cases that are just like this. Bet Shammai says, no, we can allow her in all cases, even if it's not exactly the same as this one. So Bet Shammai doesn't mind expanding from one example to anything similar. Bet Hillel says, no, only something that's just like that example. But Bet Hillel eventually changed their minds. Now, Ne'emar Rabbi Chananya ben Akiba, B'Rabanan, B'Plukta de Bet Shammai or Bet Hillel kamipalge. Now they have this machloket between Bet Hillel and Bet Shammai, where in Prince, not only a machloket in this actual case, but there seems to be a principle that Bet Hillel will only apply a precedent to the exact circumstances, and Bet Shammai will expand the precedent to similar circumstances. So perhaps the following machloket between Rabbi Chananya and Rabbanan parallels that between Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel. Detanya, what's the case? Lo yisa adam mehatat ve'efer hatat v'avidem b'yarden basfina. Baraita says, here's a law. The rabbis made an enactment. A person should not carry waters of purification or ashes of purification. This means para aduma, ashes. That's when they're pure ashes. Or when you want to use them, you mix them with water, and you get water of chatat. Either one of these is tahor and has to remain tahor in order to be usable. Now, if you want to get it to another country, you want to get it across the Jordan River, so that let's say it's made in Eretz Israel, and now you're going to use it in Bavel to purify people that are tamei lemet over there. You should not take it and carry it over the Jordan River in a boat. That's not allowed. We'll see why. Because one time it happened, and turned out there was a piece of a dead body in the boat underneath that they didn't see, and then it became tameh, and they ruined a portion of para aduma. And so they said, you know what, from now on, if you have to transport it, you can't do it in this way. And not only that, this is all Rabbanan. And not only that, you cannot take it from one side and throw it to the other side. Also, not a good way to transfer the Paraduma waters across the Jordan. Velo yeshitem al penei hamayim, and don't float them. Put them on a little paddle board and push it across. No good. Velo yedkibem velo lo al gabe behema velo al gabe chabero, and don't have put them in on the back of an animal or back of another person, and they will swim across with it. The only way you're allowed to do it is if the person's feet are on the ground. If they're walking through the river and they hold the paraduma waters or ashes up high, so that, then that's the only way you can transfer it across the river. Aval maviram al hageshet, or you can also walk over a bridge, because a bridge, even though it's over the water, it's also solid ground, so you have to be walking on solid ground. You can't be floating or on a boat. And this is true not only for the Jordan River, but for all rivers. One is not allowed to take the paraduma ashes on a boat on any river. That is all Rabbanan. So you see that the case, we're going to see the case in a minute. The case only happened on a boat in the Jordan River. But Rabbanan said we're going to expand it to be like everything. So it seems that Rabbanan is like Bet Shammai, that take one incident and expand it to all others. Rabbi Chananya ben Akiba omer lo amru ela yardenu b'sfinach u'maseh shahaya. Rabbi Chananya says, well, no, when the rabbis made this decree about transporting paraduma ashes, they only made it regarding the Jordan River and in a boat, because that's the case that originally happened. If it's not the Jordan River, or if it's not a boat, anything else is allowed. So, lema Rabbanan de'amre kebet Shammai, v'Rabbi Chananya ben Akiba de'amar kebet Hillel. Maybe we can propose that Rabbanan, who here expand from the one case to all cases, is like Bet Shammai, who similarly expand from one case where we believe the woman in that case to all cases, and we could always believe the wife. And Rabbi Chananya ben Akiba, who said we should limit the prohibition only to the exact case that happened on a boat in the Jordan River, so he limits it only to the exact precedent. He would agree with Bet Hillel, who also said we only give permission to believe a wife in the exact circumstances, and we do not expand it. One's the Chumrah and one's the Kula, but that's not the point. The point is the principle: do you expand a precedent to other cases? So that's what we propose, but we're going to reject it. Amri lach Rabbanan, who did expand the prohibition here in the case of the boat and transferring ashes, they will tell you, Anan amrinan af kebet Hillel. Really, we could agree with Bet Hillel regarding the believing the wife only in limited circumstance. Ad kan lo kamar Bet Hillel hatam el mishum demirtat. The reason why Bet Hillel said, you know what, we're going to limit it to only one country, only within the same country, is because there she's fearful to lie. One country to another, then she's not going to be fearful. So Bet Hillel had a good substantive reason to only believe a wife in the exact circumstances that happened, that the incident happened. If it's close by, she will be fearful of lying. If it's far, she won't be fearful of lying, because who's going to come so far and reveal her lie? But here, where the problem was that they transferred it by a boat over water, and it turned out there was a piece of a dead body in the boat, well, that could happen equally on any boat over any body of water. There's nothing particularly interesting about the Jordan River over any other river. It's not like more boats with dead bodies go over the Jordan River than other rivers. It's all the same. So there's no reason to make a distinction. And therefore, Rabbanan may very well expand on the one case regarding the boat, but not expand regarding the wife. Rabbi Chananya ben Akiba omer amar lach ana damre after Bet Shammai. And similarly the other way around, Rabbi Chananya, who said the rabbis only prohibited the boat and the Jordan, and we don't expand. That's true, but they may very well agree with Bet Shammai when it comes to believing a wife in all cases. The reason why he's going to follow Bet Shammai in the case of the wife is because she is going to take upon herself the responsibility to investigate, because she's going to get remarried, and if she's lying, she'll be in trouble. So there, we can expand it to all cases. Mali makom karov, mali makom rachok. What's the difference if it's near or far? She's going to want to make sure that she never has a situation where it turns out her husband comes back. And people do travel, so she will be afraid to lie, and she will check it out and not get remarried until she knows it's true. Hacha mishum maaseh shaya b'yarden b'sfina dava maaseh gezur rabanan b'shan harot lo hava maaseh lo gezur rabanan. Whereas here, regarding the boat, it's only because of that incident that happened in the Jordan on a boat. So exactly like that happened, the rabbis made a gezerah there. In other rivers, the rabbis did not make a gezerah. Why didn't they make a gezerah? It's kind of like today. Sometimes if there's an accident at a intersection where there are stop signs, so the city will come and put a stoplight there because the accident happened there. Now it's true, a block over is the exact same type of streets. There's no reason why. It just happened to be the accident happened there. Nevertheless, they put a light there so that shouldn't happen again in that place in that way. Not going to put a light on every corner, but just the one that happened to have the accident. So too here, since it happened on the Jordan in that way, and the rabbis didn't want that to happen again, so they only made a gezerah on that. They're not going to make a gezerah on everything in the whole world. Okay, my maaseh shaya. Finally, what is actually the story regarding the paraduma waters? Tamar Rav Yehuda Marav maaseh be'adam shaya ma'abir me'chatat ve'efer chatat bi'aden ubasfina. One time, someone was carrying the waters of Chatat and ashes of the Paraduma in the Jordan River on a boat. And they only found later that there was a kezayit size of a corpse that was in the bottom of the boat that they didn't originally see, and then it made everything in the boat tameh. Amru lo yisa adam me'chatat ve'efer chatat ve'berem be'yarden u'basfina. Because it happened, the rabbi said, you know what? Don't do that again. But by that they meant only. That's the machloket that we said before. Is it only this exact case? Or did they say, don't do anything like this? Always have your feet on the ground, no floating, no putting the paraduma on any flotation device, only if you're actually carrying it and have your feet on the ground. Baruch Adonai L'olam, amen v'amen.